August 12th. It is 6:30, and my name is Bill Horns. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Transportation and Transit Commission. First item is roll call. I know that Charity Ellison has indicated she will not be here. Gabriella Gerhardt.
Here.
Michael Gernetsky.
Here.
Bill Horns, that's me. I'm here. Troy Klein.
Here.
Jason Strauss. And Rich Tate.
Here.
We have 5 of 7 as a quorum. We do have a public appearance. Is this for an item on the agenda? No. Okay. Traffic? Not explicitly. Why don't we have you speak?
Which one?
Either one.
And you please give your name and address.
Do I have to push this? Oh, there it's on. My name is DJ Aarons at 5866 Tree Line Drive in Fitchburg.
Thank you. And go ahead with your comment.
Okay, the reason I want to say something is my house overlooks the bicycle crossing that crosses over Seminole Highway by Dunn's Marsh.
Okay.
And I hear probably 4 screeches a day when the lead car comes by at the last second. They see a bike, so they slam on their brakes, where the people behind that have no clue what's going on, and boom, I don't know, you could look it up from the police, but I don't know how many times the police have been called there. I see ambulances and fire trucks and cop cars, and so short of someone losing their life, I'm just wondering what the ideas were, such as, now there's a stop sign there, great big red stop sign, that none of the bikers adhere to. They just push right through the intersection. And if you put where they have to hit a button and the flashing yellow lights go on in both directions, so the people behind the initial person knows something's up because it's right on a corner, I think that would help. And then if you also put a sign up that says it's mandatory that you press the button when crossing the street for bikers or walkers or whatever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you for coming with your comments. There is an item on the agenda, which we'll get to in a few minutes, called Bicycle and Pedestrian Crossing Prioritization. You might want to stick around and listen to what Andrew McFadden has to say about that. I think it pertains to this. I think that crossing is one of the ones on the list that Andrew has some data for, but it's not the next item. But hang in there and we'll get to it.
Okay, thanks.
Not too long. Thank you for coming.
Maybe we could move that item up on the agenda with unanimous consent.
I think it's pretty close to the top already, so.
Okay.
Next item is approval of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda? And would anyone like to move or to ask for someone to move approval of the agenda?
I move for approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Motion is made and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we've approved the agenda.
Can I make a comment?
Pardon me?
Can I make a comment just in general about the agenda?
Sure.
The agenda packet on the website, typically, in most committees, it includes the agenda at the beginning of the agenda packet. Mm-hmm. And for Transition Transit, it typically doesn't. And I find it useful to have the agenda at the top of the document when I have it open. So if we could include that in the future, if it's not too much trouble, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, I think that's a little heads up for Andrew. Maybe you could remember that. Thank you. Thank you. Next item 5, approval of minutes. We have the minutes from the July 8th meeting. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move to approve.
Second, is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second by Rich. All those,
I do have a one comment, I'm sorry.
yeah, no,
If I may. Under the design contract, sorry, resolution 11921, it's page 2. It talks about the amendment to recommend the quote staff recommended intersection control. I think it'd be better if we explained that meant the roundabout. Since I do think this is a topic that will come up again in council, I think it's good for the minutes to reflect that the intention was for the roundabout.
Yeah, as the person who participated in that motion, I agree that specifying that it does involve a roundabout would be helpful.
all right. I think the simplest thing, Andrew, if you can amend those minutes to reflect that comment.
Just, if I may, could I just quickly share my screen just to dive into it a little bit? So I believe we're talking about this 119-21, and so far, what I include so far was that there was a move to amend the resolution to change the language staff recommended intersection control to a single lane roundabout. That's what I believe I included in it. I don't know if you wanted more in there, and then I just said the resolution as amended pass. Is that what you're looking for? Or
I guess my intention with the change is just that when it says to explain that the staff recommended intersection control is the roundabout design.
Okay.
I think that topic might come up again, or will come up again at council.
Okay.
And I think
Yep.
it's good for there to be clarity that the TTC recommended the roundabout design.
I see. Gotcha. Yep. Okay. We'll do.
Okay, so
Thank
I would, just for a formality, I'll just take a second. I will take that as a motion to so amend the minutes. Is there a second on that motion?
Second?
Made and seconded. Any other discussion about the minutes? All those in favor of that motion to amend, say aye.
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 Opposed? None opposed. All those in favor of approving the amended minutes, aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you. So we have the amended minutes. Next item, 7A, Transit Finance Update. Andrew, is that one you're going to give us a little talk about?
Sure. Yep. I can share my screen. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Okay. Very good. Yeah. So I think next up, report from department. Is that right? And then go into transit.
Oh, my.
So yeah. So certainly
We're on the report from the
Fitchburg-
department, item A.
What was that?
Yes, we're in the report from the department,
Okay. Awesome.
item A.
So Fitchburg Road, progressing on schedule or ahead of schedule. Cahill Main is now reopened and High Ridge Trail is now closed, and they'll be closed until next Saturday. We are hoping, I know there's been a lot of congestion through there, so mid-September, we're hoping to get kind of new southern half of Caddis constructed and traffic shifted back over, which should add that right turn bay back, and so that should help a little bit. But we're generally tracking for early November, late October, so that's definitely on schedule. West Lacey reconstruction and design continues. We're technically looking for a public meeting either the week of the 23rd or the following week of the 30th. And so we're just kind of buttoning up some items before we start getting that ready for the public to see. And so that will include both the West Lacey kind of redesign that based on the public comment that we got, and also we talked last time about the intersection control there at Seminole and Lacey. And so I think there was some desire from council to just make sure that we got that in front of the public one more time and make sure that we heard any discussion on intersection control options, basically the always stop, the signal, and roundabout. And so we're going to kind of talk about the West Lacey redesign and the intersection control options at that meeting. And again, it probably be the week of August 30th, but we're still trying to lock down a date. And then on South Saline, we're going to certainly talk about this a little bit later for the proposed typical section, but we also have the Highway Safety Improvement Program, so that got updated. It's kind of a phase 2 of the project, and that we'll be sending that out for a Highway Safety Improvement Program application tomorrow, so ahead of the August 15th deadline. So that's kind of what we have going on here. We certainly have some projects going on. Resurfacing will start up here in the next 2 weeks. And we have the water main stuff going on in South Saline. Those are some of the big projects around town. But.
And I apologize for just stepping in, but I realized that Troy's idea earlier was a good one, to move up item 7C, just because Mr. Ahrens is here and was interested in that topic. So
Sure.
Without the formality of amending the agenda, I'll just ask if you could take that up next in your department report.
Yep, definitely. And I know Troy also had some specific questions as well of, some kind of, just housekeeping things. And so we can also talk about that a little bit later too. But yeah, I can definitely jump up to that.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question about the previous slide?
Yep.
In terms of the public meeting, I guess my preference would for it to be the following week. Obviously, I know scheduling can be difficult just because that's a pretty fast turnaround in terms of getting the word out. And I would ask that you email the alders now and let them know that this is in the process of being scheduled and that you'll let them know as soon as it is, so that we have some time to do some outreach. But it's good to give us a heads up that it's coming, just so that we know that we're ready to go when the date is set.
Okay. Yep, for sure.
One other suggestion too is if we can notify any of the landowners that are adjacent to the construction work, specifically any of the homes that are on Lacey Road currently, and then also maybe reaching out to Quarry Vista. I can help you coordinate some of that stuff, but that neighborhood is kind of directly impacted one way or another by construction efforts that would be going on there.
Yep.
Andrew,
sure.
Troy, I would add Public Works and the TTC and maybe Finance to the CC list.
Okay. Very good. And then I know we did have a request, just before I get done with the report from the department, there was it wasn't a specific agenda item, but there's kind of a request for some housekeeping items. I do kind of have a report back on that. So I think there were kind of 3 different items, the first being kind of a dedicated laptop. And I think, we're kind of working through that. I think there are some dedicated laptops up there, and we might be able to work through kind of what the setup is. But I know, next time I'm in there, we can definitely get that. And so that's an option. As far as having a copy of Robert's Rules of Order, I think there are some there, and then I think that there's a plan to do some training, as well as kind of the introductory packet. And so that was kind of what the latest direction I got. It was pretty pricey from a book, so I think they want to try to keep those copies to a minimum. But there should be one there in the council chambers, and then let me know if we can always try to budget one more, but let me know if that works. And I think there was a third item. Oh, printing out the packet. Certainly, next time I'm going forward, albeit with Delta, it's hard to say where we'll be at, but I'll plan to print them out and kind of put them down in there. So just in case you get a paper copy of the agenda, we can definitely do that. So those were the kind of 3 requests, and we can definitely make those.
Can I
Thank
interrupt?
you, Andrew.
Can I interrupt a minute? I don't think you need to print those out. If the packet's complete, that's all we need. What I would like to see, though, is the packet, all your information in the packet, so that I don't have to look at the screen. I can't focus that far.
Gotcha.
But I don't.
I think we had a separate request for it printed from Troy. But yeah, I can definitely, just some of this stuff, you never know until kind of day before on some of the news. So just from the report, I generally put in here, but I'm putting more and more in the packet, so.
Yeah, we can take this offline, I think, don't you?
Yeah, I'm not sure where we are with the discussion or the formality of this. Troy had made this request, these 3 items. He sent a memo, and Andrew was responding to that. I gather, Troy, you would still like to see a printed copy of the whole thing?
When you're the chair of the meeting and things are happening, if you're on the wrong screen and you want to look at the agenda or something like that, that's when you need it. And then, or if the laptop that's in use by the chair goes on the fritz, then you have something to refer to and, keep the meeting going. So obviously it's only, like the last time I couldn't bring my own copy of the printed agenda because my printer was on the fritz. So I didn't have a copy to refer to at the time when I needed it. So that's, it's a help just to help things move along when there's a
Right.
problem.
Okay.
Yep, it's a fail-safe. Yeah, we can definitely do that.
I mean,
So I think
I brought my own printed copy, but, this is just a backup.
So I think it's a small procedural item, and I think it'll be covered, I gather. So having said that, Andrew, could you go to this bicycle and pedestrian crossing data item that you've given us some information?
Yeah, so, so basically, we previously had an RFB, a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, out on McKee at the Badger State Crossing. The city's looking to find basically a replacement for that equipment now that there's a bridge there as part of the McKee project. And so we did collect some trail and vehicle data at prominent locations over the summer. And so that's what's included in your packet. And so, we have 7 sites that we collected. So, you can see the date of the collection, the day, generally weekdays. And we just did 1 hour from 8 to 9 every day. I know that some of these might have a little bit more volume in the afternoon, but we kind of felt like it was a good proxy just to kind of keep it all equal. Yeah, sure.
Do we have a way to blow that up so it's
You see that okay, or does that look weird?
still not readable from?
Okay.
Yeah, it is in the packet, but I was just thinking
Yep.
for Mr. Aaron's, it's a little hard to see.
Hopefully that works a little bit better.
All right, good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so what you can kind of see here is just working from left to right. So, date, day, pedestrians, bicycle counts. These are hourly counts. So how many crossed that crosswalk in an hour. Then we have the total volume, the vehicle volume in that hour, or for some of them, we got it basically a week later, but on that same day. And then vehicles in a day. And then we also have speed information. So the speed limit, the 85th percentile, which is basically the speed at which 85% of drivers drive that or slower. And then the 50th percentile, same logic, typical, and then average. And then I also kind of multiplied the hourly volume times bike ped count. So this column times the vehicle, it's an hour column. And that gives us kind of an exposure metric. So basically in that peak hour, basically how many, a metric for conflicts, basically, of multiply those two together, the higher the number, the more potential conflicts. So these are really just proxy variables for us to kind of understand, where we might prioritize this. And really this came out of, we have our bicycle pedestrian plan, and, we put the threshold pretty high for what would require an RFB. And some of these wouldn't even really qualify, even the Seminole and Capital City Trail. But the fact that we already have the equipment and it seems like we should be, getting use out of it, especially as DJ noted, we did have 13 rear end collisions at the Seminole and Cap City Trail crossing in the last 5 years, which is definitely elevated. And it's a limited sight distance. The pedestrians kind of pop out. There hasn't been a single pedestrian or bicycle crash there, but there certainly has been a higher than expected rear end collision crash there. So that's definitely the front runner right now. I'll note that we don't have the Cannonball Trail on here because the Cannonball Trail was closed to the west. And I'll note that that probably also increased the trail crossings at the Cap City Trail. But the intern we had counted said that not that many people were kind of crossing to go back up to the Cannonball Trail. So that would be the only thing. And I did take this to the bike committee, and they suggested that we try to find some more equipment to put at both the Cap City Trail and the Cannonball Trail. We'll try to look into that, but right now, really, we're just looking to at least make sure we're getting our equipment back out there and getting use out of it. And really, the real cost is installing pole bases and getting the equipment back up. And so, but I just thought I'd bring this for review to make sure we're all kind of transparent about our process and about trying to get this equipment back up and in use.
What is the timetable for making that decision? Thank you.
I mean, it's unlikely. So it's possible we could get it in this fall. However, that might be unlikely. So it would probably be construction next spring. But I'm happy to bring this as a formal resolution. But really, it's probably going to be less than $5,000 in capital dollars to get those pole bases in, and we can do the rest in house. So really, we're just looking for kind of feedback now of,
okay,
does this seem reasonable?
And Ken, just for Mr. Aaron's benefit, do you understand what the equipment is that he's talking about? That your crossing is a strong candidate to get that stuff.
Yeah.
Andrew, I have a question.
Oh.
Yeah.
What is the actual law enforcement for those stop signs? Are those treated as moving vehicles policed by our fine police department?
Yeah, that's a good question. So from my understanding, they're there to stop, to basically, indicate to trail users that they are required to stop. In many ways, though, once folks get into the trail crossing itself, really the yield to trail users law is in effect, and definitely has some gray area of, trail users can't just jump out in front of vehicles, but at the same time, vehicles have to yield to trail users who are in the crosswalk. So it kind of creates this, gray area between when a vehicle arrives and when a trail user arrives, between who has the right of way there. Certainly the stop sign is there to make folks stop and make sure that they have a gap before they continue. And so I think that kind of clarifies that. But yeah, I mean, basically, if there was an infraction here, it wouldn't be a failure yield. It would be for a vehicle, but the stop sign wouldn't be the kind of traffic control. It would be the state statute of the trail crossing.
Okay, so the enforcement of this isn't necessarily on bikers and whether they do or do not stop. It would be more on the drivers of such cars to notice that there are bikers in the intersection, and then, as was mentioned before, the attention or lack thereof from drivers potentially behind that car, that lead car, that could be inattentive driving, whatever that would legally be, to make sure that they're paying attention. Okay.
Yep, following too closely, or careless driving. Yep, for sure. So is there any feedback on this kind of short list? I know, certainly that location stands out as kind of the highest, kind of second highest from exposure perspective is Lacey and Sunflower, but that's quite a bit further down.
Andrew, what I'll say is that I'll probably share this at the council meeting in my TTC report and see if the council members have any suggestions based on
for sure,
their experience.
Yep, and I can, if they want a formal resolution, we can definitely do that. I just know that there's a fairly small dollar amount, but we want to make sure that it gets put up where, the city wants it. So.
Yeah,
Did
I think
we have
we'll
any,
start with that, yeah.
Did we have any baseline for what this currently was for? So what the counts were for the McKee Road crossing?
That's a good question. I mean, it'd be considerably higher vehicle crossing, and then definitely, I would think somewhat higher pedestrian and bike crossing, just because, I mean, there is, basically the Cannonball and Cap City could then converge to Badger State or Military Ridge, and so it's a little bit unknown. But yeah, I could definitely get some data on that if that'd be helpful. I don't have that offhand. And I would say generally we wouldn't, these are like our pedestrian and bicycle plan kind of creates a matrix to try to say what is, appropriate treatments. And generally, as you get to the McKee type volume, multi-lane, that you would start to transition to a hawk, or for example, like the emergency signal there at Marketplace. Basically, we have just some thresholds of where we would consider compliance to be reasonable that we could put in one of these. Because really, the flashers, just so everybody knows, and we're all on the same page, are really more of a, just another advisory that someone wants to cross. They aren't compulsory. They don't require somebody to stop. It's just kind of another warning that there is somebody who wants to cross there. And they definitely have improvements. It's something like 50 to 88% improvement in compliance. But that to be said, it's not a stoplight. Vehicles aren't required to stop.
Andrew, I gather then at this point that if somebody on the city council or maybe on this commission wants to formalize a decision, that you're open to doing that, but otherwise this will be an administrative decision that will be made within the by you and other city staff based on these data?
Yep. I mean, that's yeah, certainly I would say if you want to give us direction that you'd like a formal resolution, we can do that. And then we can certainly just plan for next spring. But otherwise, yeah, I just want to get in front of folks knowing that there's a pretty small dollar amount, and we just want to get some concurrence that this seems reasonable.
So let me leave it this way for the commission. If anybody would want us to discuss and act formally on this decision, let me know and we'll put it on the agenda for next time. Otherwise, and with that, I think we can move ahead with our agenda tonight.
It'd be nice to have this chart added to a column of the number of police reportable incidents at each of these crossings. That might help a lot in making a decision.
Yep, for sure. Yeah,
Thank you.
we could definitely add crashes. And, I hesitated to do that before only because some of these have, so RFBs are not specifically shown to reduce rear end collision crashes. They're definitely more tailored towards increasing yielding compliance and reducing pedestrian bicycle crashes. But it's not to say that we wouldn't expect to see a reduction. Certainly it's going to increase the conspicuity of that crossing and when people are using it, so further ahead. And so, but yeah, we can definitely add pedestrian bicycle crashes to this location, and then all crashes as well, or to this table.
Okay.
And I'll send that to you, Gabriella, before council meeting.
Thanks.
So I think you can go ahead with the rest of your these other items.
Very good. So the next up is the transit finance update. And so there's kind of two quick updates here. So one, I talked last time about the network design study. That has been released. It's on Metro's website. This first link will get you to the website, the general redesign website. There's a survey link up there, and so I'll just kind of pop it open real fast, just so folks can see it. All right. So this is the website, and so if you scroll down to this alternatives report. That's going to be where it is. There is the conclusion appendix in a separate report. And I'll just go to that real fast just to kind of show you. I believe that I felt like there was a pretty interesting graphic down here that showed the delta in accessibility between basically for a rider at Fish Hatchery Road and Post. And so I believe that one is, oops, I lost it. I'm sorry. So basically all of these just show different areas of the network and kind of that delta in, I'm sorry, I had it queued up and then I must have reloaded the screen. But so basically all of these show, and so you can find, we have, I believe, 2 in Fitchburg. I'll just kind of generally describe what we're seeing here. So basically the light blue is the new access, basically so this is comparing from existing to each of these networks, the ridership network and the coverage network. And basically we're just, they took the time to share kind of how access changes. This is a 45-minute kind of access shed in between these 2 different networks. And so you can see there are some considerable differences between the ridership network and the coverage network. I think we talked about this a little bit last time. So again, the ridership network is really prioritizing, fewer routes with high frequency transit. So you can see kind of the, potentially the South Line BRT coming down and going to, Caddis and Cahill and coming back. And so that would be, 15-minute headways every 15 minutes, right? And then we potentially would also have, some kind of routes between basically the transfer points. So this one would kind of follow that 1618 route that would go there. So I'll just zoom in so you guys can actually see it. So the G in this ridership model would kind of follow that 1618 route that's currently out there. And then the E would follow more that 52 route. But these are all, 30-minute headways. So every 30 minutes you can expect them. And they go to places, folks actually want to go instead of necessarily just a transfer point. So that, the E would go all the way into University and then kind of loop back around and then go into the Capitol. And so that's kind of the ridership model. So it'll be fewer routes, but you'll notice the 40 is not circling through here. They don't have the 49 on here, the 75, which are commuter routes. And so those could still be programmed, but this is just kind of everyday, all-day service. I'll show quickly this is the existing network, and this is the coverage alternative. And so you can see on the coverage alternative, so definitely more routes, similar to what we have currently. And so this would, the 95 would kind of mimic what the 40 currently does.
Could you,
And,
Andrew, just to interrupt, it is hard for me to know where those lines are. Can you give me a reference here? Where's the belt line in this map?
Oh, sure, yeah, Beltline is running kind of along G here. So this is the Beltline.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so in this particular case, the G is kind of the 1618 similar. So that route's very similar between the 2 models. It's just that it would dip down a little bit more here in the coverage model versus the ridership model where, it basically just comes up and goes over. And so, I mainly just bring this up to kind of compare the 2 alternatives, let folks know that it's out there. And so this, we've been waiting a couple months for this. Now it's on the website. And really, they're looking for comments back August and September. And so, we'll have a chance to kind of check it back in September with all your questions. But I would just say, please read this, check it out. Unfortunately, it was released, last week, and there wasn't a whole lot of fanfare about it. I think they're going to really release a survey at the end of the week and kind of let folks know about it. So that's the only reason it didn't make it to the packet. But otherwise, I think there's a lot of information in this, and I'm definitely happy to answer questions you have now, but otherwise we can reserve most of the questions till next time, and we can talk a little bit more about the finance.
Will something will Madison Metro be doing something formal before our next meeting? Will they be releasing another draft or something, or report?
Nope. So this is their draft, and as far as I know, they're gonna kind of broadcast this survey link out tomorrow. And so this survey link goes to a survey that I think does a really great job of kind of breaking down, what preferences folks have between the ridership and coverage model, and kind of how it would benefit them, their community, and kind of the Madison area at large. And so definitely I would say for folks at home, check out the report, and then please fill out the survey. They also have a question to identify, where you typically take transit. And so you can, I'll just quickly show you.
If
what that looks
this commission wanted to make any kind of forceful recommendation to the council, when should we do that? What kind of a deadline would we be operating under to make a difference?
Yeah.
If we wanted to make a difference in this?
Yep, that's a good question. So they have a quick timeline on here. I'll just try to pull that up. So I believe that's right towards, yep, there we go. Yeah, so really what they're looking at is this developed draft network plan. So right now, we're in August. They have the survey. I think they have some focus groups, public meetings. I think those will be on the website. They're not currently on the website as far as I know. So really between now and December is when that kind of public information, which one do you prefer, take a little bit of this, alternative and a little bit of this alternative, and put them together. I think that's really going to be where we would provide comments. So certainly the survey would be a huge one for folks at home and all the TTC members. As far as a formal recommendation, in the next couple months, I think is really when we'll have to do that. And then, that'll, there's definitely some interplay between basically what Madison wants and what we want on some of these routes, knowing that they're going in between us. And so I think we'll be working with them. None of these are exclusively Fitchburg routes or exclusively Madison routes. We're kind of, we're very much intertwined. So I think that'll be kind of a conversation between us and Madison on what the final.
So I have two questions. One is, does this commission want to develop any kind of formal recommendation about this? And secondly, for Gabriella, what do you see as the city council's role in this? Will the city council possibly be wanting to formalize a recommendation about this process?
Yeah, so I think the council needs to have a full conversation about Metro before we vote on anything in terms of making a decision. This intersects with the fact that the budget also happens this time of year, and the decision about what to do in terms of funding for Metro in the budget is part of this conversation. But if the committee is interested in doing something in September where we dig into this and think through what we'd like to recommend, with the hope that maybe we could come out with some sort of decision, I think that could be helpful leading into budget season. I don't know if that timing is too soon, but there's a lot of things that have to happen before the end of the year, and budget is most of the budget conversations are gonna be happening in October.
Okay.
Those are my initial thoughts.
Okay. I guess it seems to me that we should put this on the September agenda and give people a chance to think about it and think about whether we want to make a recommendation to the council. I assume that that's the proper role that we would play in this, or the role we would play, if anything, as a commission. So I guess I'll leave that at that. It's Andrew, I noticed in someplace online I got a printout, and it shows the next steps for this thing, and it says January 2022 is they'll develop a draft network plan, March finalize a network plan. So are we, would our goal, if we want to put our finger into this be to make a recommendation for the draft network plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes, I think from a timeline perspective, we don't want to wait too long because once it gets draft, there's going to be more subtle changes, I would say. So I think, October, November is definitely the right time. And I think there's certainly an interplay here with the financing, which I can go into next, and that Gabriella mentioned, that both from our operating budget and kind of how we're planning on funding versus from a, basically getting direct funding from the state versus our current setup with getting funding through Metro, basically that transit assistance through Metro.
Okay.
And so I think all those decisions have to be made before the end of the year so that we can, have that option for next year.
Well, unless,
I can,
oh, sorry.
and I can talk more about that if you'd like
Yeah.
on the next slide.
We'll talk, right now or at the next
Yeah,
meeting?
yep, yeah. So I can just roll it into, so, from partner agreement, I talked about most of this last time. And so I'll just I promise you guys the details. And so these are the details. And so what this does, this is some preliminary numbers. I mean, this is still certainly back in the napkin, but I'm going to walk through the whole thing because there's a lot of numbers on here. So vehicle hours, I'll just say that I'll say generally what we're talking about here is we're comparing two different scenarios, a scenario where we would receive direct state funding. And so last January, we notified WSDOT that we intended to do that. It was non-binding, but it was required if we wanted to for 2022. And so we notified them to give us the option. And so basically that would mean that we're receiving no operating assistance from Metro itself, but instead paying them kind of the full dollar per hour cost and then getting reimbursements twice a year from the state. And so it's just a different pot of money. They currently get their own pot of money, basically for Milwaukee and Madison specifically, and then they dole out that money based on a vehicle hours basis. And so we'd be basically going for a smaller community bucket of money so it's a win-win. Metro gets basically more of their pot of money, and so does their partners, and we get a slightly better percentage of cost sharing. And so along with that, the state would like, kind of a planning study, which we have. I'll note that is, certainly a requirement of asking for this, of kind of showing our future need. And I think that we can definitely do that, and I can kind of explain that more. But just walking down all these numbers. So vehicle hours, you'll note that in 2019, we did have more vehicle hours than in 2020, so that went down. This is our current, and so this is basically the COVID vehicle hours.
And that's just the number of bus hours? Is that what this is?
Yep, that's the number of transit bus ride hours. Yep.
Okay.
And so that is really the number that we get charged based on. So we get, there's a lot of numbers on here, but the bottom line is that times the dollars per hour is really where our our full partner share comes from. And then it's just how much of that gets, operating assistance versus whatnot. So you'll notice that in 2022, that number goes up quite a bit. And so that is really this 2019 value plus half of the town of Madison's vehicle hours. And that's a gross estimate right now. Again, there's going to be a lot of unknowns come August 2022 when this new network redesign goes into effect. But for right now, they're just kind of blanketing half of town of Madison just for simplicity. So that number is still unknown, and I would say that it could certainly go down or up depending upon what we want to do as a city with transit routes. And so the next number is really this net operating depreciation costs, and so you can see that there's definitely some differences, and so this is really where we start seeing the differences between the two scenarios. And so obviously no differences up through 2021, but once they start, this is really the delta between, you can see, there's a huge jump, but with state funding, we're basically increasing our direct cost, knowing that we're going to be able to apply 55% of that to the state and get that in reimbursement. So that's when we start seeing that go up. The escrow balance is really what I've been talking about in the past of this is the Federal CARES Act money that Metro got, and they would still be giving us our portion of that funding. And so this kind of shows the comparison between the two alternatives. Basically, there's little difference in 2022. I would say, certainly it goes down more initially, but then kind of levels off. I'll note that the escrow starts going back up in 2025. And so really with this state funding, there's been some aggressive assumptions made. And so for right now, certainly the direct funding would not only save us money in the annual, as you can see down here, but it will also increase our escrow balance year over year. So it both saves us money now and in the future. And really, I just want to highlight this dollar per hour. So you'll see that with direct state funding, our costs almost double per hour, but this is more of our raw rate. And so this doesn't have any reductions from Metro. This is what we would be paying if there wasn't any operating assistance, basically about $106 per hour for every hour that any of our buses run in Fitchburg. And then you can see the escrow as a percentage of our annual budget. And so this is just there to help us kind of understand. And so you can, again, see that this goes, it kind of starts trending down, but then it starts to trend back up. All that, basically the bottom line is that we'd be saving something between $50,000 and $100,000 per year by going with direct funding over the way we're currently funded through Metro. Where we currently receive our operating assistance through Metro's larger bucket. And so I think that this definitely represents a good deal in terms of a win-win. And it potentially, so I think one version of this is knowing that, there's a ridership option on the table, that Metro might reduce some of their routes and kind of double down on some of the more high-performing routes that could potentially leave some areas, without transit, so left behind. An option might be to do a ride share or a micro transit that would be individually funded from Fitchburg that could cost something like $200,000, and we could get reimbursement for half of that. And in doing so, we could basically stick with Metro and kind of what they're, and use their routes for, great access to downtown and campus and, to the west side, kind of what that ridership map looks like, or, mixed in with some coverage. And then also kind of complement that with a micro transit or kind of a direct or demand responsive transit with some of this increased funding. Or alternatively, we would just stay with Metro, but do this direct state funding option and just save $50,000 to $100,000 per year. Or there's certainly the option of trying to reduce service slightly and staying with Metro. I feel like there's a lot of different options here, but I think, generally speaking, I would say that the direct state option gives us more options, not only from saving money, but also from adding our own independent service and getting that 50% cost share from the state. So with that, open up for questions. Sorry.
Okay, what's not clear to me yet, and I have to admit I don't really understand this. What decision do we have a voice in here? What would we be asked to decide or judge? I mean, are we going to see a resolution or something in a future meeting that we're going to act on? Or
yeah, I think that makes sense. So I got these numbers last week, and so I'm showing them to you as about as fast as I could.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think the hope is that we get some direction. I believe before December, so that we can basically apply officially to WISDOT. If we want to take this direct state funding route option. And so I think I just want to get you these numbers as early as possible, so you guys could give us some direction of, is that a resolution that we want to start crafting? Is that I kind of open up for discussion of, basically to lay it out, there's several options from a financing perspective. There's several options from, weighing in on Metro's routes. And then there's probably also several options in kind of an independent transit provision, specifically similar to what we did in the past with the rideshare program. And so I think there's a lot of complication there, and we can kind of take each independently if you want, or we can kind of talk about how it all interplays.
Can I jump in?
Please.
Okay, so the direct state funding is really interesting. I'm glad that you've done some cost comparisons. I think that's something that we need to seriously look at. I think just in terms of entering into the escrow and that new partner agreement, is that something that we're gonna have to sign, like with Metro, like an official process of like entering into that agreement? And do you know what the timeline is on that?
So yes, that would, so I don't know yet what the timeline would be. It's likely to be, I think, they're cognizant of that we have to try to wrap this up before next year. And so I think the hope is this fall. But yeah, that's a whole kind of commitment that we would need to have a formal resolution to sign this. And they're trying to keep the partner agreements somewhat similar, just from a simplicity argument. And so I think the hope is that Metro has a lot of partners, that they would give us some agreement, and then I'd take that to you guys, and you would talk about,
But we don't have a target date on that yet? Like fall, like does that mean October? Does that mean November? Because I guess the reason I ask, and you might not know the answer to that, but the reason I ask is because I think that it would be worthwhile for TTC to make this a topic at the next couple of meetings. And possibly, I'm just like looking at a tentative schedule, right? So the budget we're going to be doing in the end of October. So we'll have all those budget conversations, which will include implicitly a discussion about Madison Metro. My hope is, my guess and my hope is that the mayor will at least keep the funding consistent, if not increase slightly. Maybe has increased probably because of Town of Madison too. Anyway, so that's October. So I wonder then if TTC in our meeting, the second Thursday of the month, we can make an official recommendation to the council. So the November meeting, and then maybe see if we can get Madison Metro as the main topic at the committee of the whole meeting at the end of November for the council. So the council can have a full discussion of it, and then potentially look at some like concrete resolutions in December, plus maybe having a public hearing in early December where we've like the council's had discussion, TTC's had discussion, there's information out there, resolutions are coming, have a public hearing so we can hear, or not like a public information meeting, like a neighborhood meeting. And then we continue maybe doing those monthly up until when we had to make those decisions about actual route selection. And I guess I'm saying all of this is because that's a potential schedule. I'm perfectly happy to hear dissenting opinions on it. But I think that we need to start getting the information to council for a discussion, open to like public discussion. And then we need to start having public hearings as soon as possible and have them regularly, at least once a month until we're making these final decisions. Because I think in these conversations at committees and council, what gets lost is the experience of the people riding the routes, and the cost of Metro ends up being a center of the conversation, when I think the center of the conversation should be the experience of people that that rely on transit. So that's a whole bunch of thoughts. I'd love to hear what other people think about that.
Well, I would have no objection to having those items come up at our subsequent meetings, but, and I just have to admit I'm a little baffled about this, but I'll get up to date on my own, maybe by talking to Andrew. But the question I have, Andrew, is what is the intersection between this issue and the previous one, the one about the approach Metro is going to take to laying out their bus routes? Is there a connection?
So I would say, real fast, to answer Gabrielle's question, so the meeting notes from our last meeting with Metros said that they're having some delays to get their city attorney up to speed. And so they said that having a contract by the end of the year might be a stretch. And so just to give you a heads up on that time frame, I think they're shooting for end of the year, but that might still not be possible. And so, and yes, Bill, to answer your question, so I would say there's, from a route basically there's a lot of interplay between Madison and our routes in either a ridership or a coverage or a combination of those two. And what comes out of that process kind of collectively, and then also from what you guys kind of recommend to Metro, would be our vehicle hours. And so, if that was plus or minus, 10, 15% from what we're currently, at, that would just have some cost implications. And so, there's certainly, I call it the interplay between if we have some routes that are going away, do we want to start to plan for a complementary service? I think that's really where it comes up. And then the financing, it is largely independent, but if we care about kind of what the overall cost implications are, I think that also plays into it. And certainly it's tough because from Metro's perspective, they're doing a regional redesign of the network. They don't have specific partner route vehicle hour totals yet. I think they're just kind of trying to get a general idea of how things are changing. And so really from our perspective, we're trying to give them some direction and me some direction on whether or not we want to pursue additional funding, additional complementary transit options. And so, yeah, to Gabriella's point, I think having some recurring meetings and getting this in front of the public would be great. I can definitely arrange that.
Could I jump in again?
Please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of the resolutions that are coming, like probably by spring, by the winter of next year, this is what I see. Direct state funding decision, which would probably have to be by December. Is that right?
I think so. I will get
Okay.
a more firm date. Yep.
So that's something that we'd probably have a resolution that would come to TTC, Finance, and Council. The second one would be entering into a new contract with Madison Metro that included an escrow account. And that is looking like December, January at the earliest. Okay. So that would be a second thing that would have to go to TTC, Finance, Council, at least. And then potential route changes based on the network redesign. And that process is looking like January to March of 2022.
Sorry, I lost you there, but that does sound right.
Okay.
To me,
so route changes, and then potentially after that point, maybe we could additionally talk about if you wanted supplementary service. But those three sound like the top three that need consideration. And based on what we just talked about in terms of timeline, I think if we have conversations in TTC, have this on the agenda in TTC in September, October, hopefully gather more information so that we can make some recommendations in November. Hope I can talk to Randy Udell about having committee of the whole take this up in November so that if we start looking at resolutions come December, we all have information and had discussion prior to that.
Yep. And I think ideally we would have all of this moved up, next month or November, and we'd have, Metro's route decisions, all that stuff. I think there's going to be some sensitivity analysis that would have to occur in 2022 based upon what we find out. But to your point, I think we can do some of that now of saying, here are the kind of several options and what the cost implications are and what the ridership implications are in the next 2 months. We can definitely do that.
And I'm going to add one more thing, if that's okay, the chair.
Please go ahead.
Okay. The other thing about this, and so for the whole committee, Andrew and I have been part of some of these partner discussions with Madison Metro for a long time now. So I think part of the problem is that Andrew and I have a lot more background in what's happening with this than any of the committee does. So this is not a new concept to me, but I know it's a new, like the escrow accounts and the new contracts. And even though we talked about the network redesign, there's other issues at stake. So I think maybe that's part of the problem. So may I suggest that for the September meeting, we have this on the agenda and perhaps we can invite someone from Madison Metro to actually present the idea that Andrew and I have been hearing about for a while, but do a presentation about where they stand, if they're ready to make it, because it sounds like they're ready to make it public and we can start having that discussion. I think maybe that would be a good next step for September.
Well, I certainly accept your advice about that agenda item. Andrew, can you do that? Can you make that happen?
Yeah, definitely. Yep, and we do have some materials from some of those meetings, notes and that sort of thing, so I can definitely send that your way ahead of time, so you can, have some
And
reading.
if we can include all of that in the agenda packet for that meeting so that we have some materials to pre-prepare with.
Yep.
And maybe come to questions with Metro, because if there's presentations or things that they're okay sharing, because obviously everything's public. So
Right.
if they're not ready for it to be public, we can't do it. But if they are ready for anything to go public, I think as much material as possible in the agenda packet so that the committee can be prepared to ask some questions of Metro would be helpful.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's a great point. This is a big topic, lots of moving parts, so,
Yeah.
throwing a lot at you, we'll regroup next time and hopefully have a lot more information.
Right.
And will you extend the invitation to Metro as well for have representative come and talk?
Yeah, I know. So, who would be the most help? Typically we always have Mick, kind of our partner liaison, but we could also have Mike, who's the network redesign kind of PM. I don't know if it would be helpful to also have Justin. I don't know exactly if, or their finance director to talk a little bit more about the financing.
I think Mick is for the committee, Mick is it's like the contact for the different partners, but he's more of a, he's less an expert and more of a generalist. And then Justin is the general manager of Madison Metro. If he's willing to come to our meeting, I would love to have him, but I know he obviously has a lot of constraints on his time. But if we can't have someone that has some expertise so they can answer some questions about the network redesign, they can answer questions about the escrows. I don't know if we need multiple people in order to do that. But I think I can anticipate that we're going to have questions about the network redesign routes and the escrow partner contract, and maybe even questions about direct state funding. If whatever group of people needs to come in order to answer those questions, I would love to have them. And I don't know if the TTC is open to it, but I would be willing to meet on a different day to accommodate their schedules so we could have that presentation. Because I think the earlier the better. If we can get this done in September, I think that makes a huge difference in terms of making sure we have enough time for this discussion, which I think is absolutely essential to have in public and over a longer period of time.
In September, and Andrew, I think we need to think about devoting that meeting to these topics, and keep everything else off if we can, because that sounds like it's going to take enough time to work through these issues when we meet in September. So are there other comments from the commissioners? Troy?
Yeah, I have, one of the questions I'd like to be addressed on escrow is it worth the while for the city of Fitchburg to minimize its escrow account or to maximize it vis-a-vis state funding? So if they penalize you or for having a large escrow in effect, then we should reduce it. If they reward you, then we should make sure we're funded at 100%. So somewhere in between, there may be a happy ground possibly, but that's the basic question I had. Is I had no insight as to whether we should minimize or maximize escrow. And Metro may be the ideal organization to answer that question.
Yep. And so just to clarify a little bit, the escrow is part of the reorganized way that Madison is trying to do their partner agreements, with the intention of, instead of going to a long-term, 10-year partner contract, they're kind of holding the portion of the CARES Act money that would have gone, directly to, or through them, but to Fitchburg. They're holding that, kind of to keep us in the contract, right? As kind of a long-term, I guess, incentive to stay in partnership with them. And so, I don't think it really has a whole lot of bearing on the state assistance. That is kind of its own pot of money. And we are going to, over the next 4 or 5 years, when a lot of this capital expenditure that, from the bus barn and that sort of thing is going to be starting ramping up, the escrow is really there to, soften that blow as we were kind of increasing cost. And so that's and as you can see in both of those, we were at roughly 50% at the end. And I could talk a lot about the escrow if you want me to. I know there's just a lot of other complications here, but so I would say there's not, escrow is initially a bunch of CARES Act money. Over time, we'll spend that down. And then at a certain point, when it gets to something like 25% or below, Metro would ask that we would increase that to keep that at some balance, basically above 25%. Again, with the incentive of making sure that there's an incentive for us to stay, because basically they have to buy the buses, they have to invest in the bus barn, all that stuff, and they just are trying to make sure that they have some more stability in some of their partner contracts. And so.
And if I
And eat some of that kind of fluctuation year to year, because you never know if costs are going to go up or down, and so that was also another concern that they're definitely addressing.
Okay.
And just to add on to that as well, in terms of the escrow account, I think it would be useful to have Madison Metro come and present it, present the conversation and how it evolved over time, because this is a conversation that's been ongoing with partners since the beginning of this year. The other thing about the escrow is that there was this huge influx of CARES Act funding, which is an opportunity to cushion the blow of increased costs, because Madison Metro has been underinvesting in infrastructure for a long time that all the partners utilize. And so there was going to be increased costs over the next 5-10 years anyway, but the CARES Act funding has the potential to soften that increase over the next few years. But with the escrow accounts, rather than all those costs would be hidden and suddenly we'd see increased costs, we'll know exactly what those costs are, but our actual budget money going out will be relatively the same, because the CARES Act will fill in that gap. I hope that makes sense. That's how I'm understanding it in a lot of ways. So, but I do think that it would be worthwhile, because I do think it's a complicated concept, and Andrew and I have a lot more background. If we can get someone from Metro to come and talk about the idea, how it evolved, how it might work, what the current understanding of it from their lawyers are, and then we can ask questions when everyone has that same background.
All right. Thank you. So I look forward to a pretty thorough discussion next time. Another planning effort besides the Madison Metro route planning thing is this Connect Greater Madison Regional Transportation Plan effort. And I mentioned that in the agenda. I know, Gabriella, I think you said at an earlier meeting that you have some link to that. You're engaged in that somehow. And a second point I wanted to mention, and so I'm not clear how that intersects with this route planning or this funding issue for that matter. But I do know that at the Plan Commission next week, they're going to get a presentation from the MPO, Madison Planning Organization, and CARPC, I think, an overview of that. So could you just take 2 minutes, Gabriella, and comment on what your role is on that, and if you think it's got any connection to the things we've just been talking about?
Yeah, so actually, the thing that I'm a part of, it's the, I'm sorry, the name is very long, and I'm trying to find the name of it. Okay, it's the Policy Advisory Committee for the Madison Beltline Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, which I think is a subset of that Madison Connects effort. And I'm on the Policy Advisory Committee. Andrew is on the Technical Advisory Committee for that. Although we haven't had a second meeting we met a month or two ago, and we haven't had a subsequent meeting, because I think this is a very long-term, 20-year outlook on what regional transportation looks like.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I have any updates right now, but I can certainly prepare something for a future meeting about what we've discussed thus far.
Okay. All right. Thank you on that. And unless Andrew had more department report type information, we'll move on to our agenda items. First one being Resolution R-14921, a resolution approving a typical section for South Saline Reconstruction Project from Aurora Avenue to West Clayton Road, and you have that in your packet. Can I have a motion to approve so we can discuss it? Is
I move to approve.
there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So that, anyway, that topic is on the floor. Is there any discussion? And I should say, by the way, by way of discussion, I'm going to insert some words of Jason, our absent commission member. He sent us an email. I think we probably all got this, but I'll read his thoughts on this topic. He says, I'm not sure if I'll be able to attend the meeting. Turns out he couldn't. I am on vacation in the Boundary Waters. Here are 6 takeaways that I gleaned from listening in the advisory meetings. First, Cheyenne needs the buffered bike lanes to allow for bike commuters as well as staying consistent with other road projects in the city. A multi-use path is not conducive for bike commuters because the multi-use path is congested with dog walkers, strollers, children on tricycles, joggers, and walkers. Second, a mini roundabout at 9 Bark is preferable as it will save drivers gasoline and therefore carbon dioxide emissions. Third, the plan provides for ample crosswalks to allow people living east of Cheyenne to access the parks and multi-use path on the west side of Cheyenne at Swan Creek, in Swan Creek. Fourth, because of the McCoy farmhouse, the number of parking spots in Uptown Crossing would most likely be around 5 spots. With so few spots, it wouldn't address the problem for delivery trucks in Uptown Crossing except for the 5 homes in which parking would be in front of. In addition, the snowplows would push snow from the road and the parking spots into the driveway of the 5 homeowners with parking, which makes the parking less attractive. Therefore, adding parking is not desirable. Fifth, there must be some treatment in the road to force right-hand turns onto Cheyenne from Rodeo Way, and similarly across the road, a treatment to force right-hand turns from Swan Creek Apartments driveway. Sixth, although this might be done by Parks Commission, align the multi-use path in Nannyberry Park with the sidewalk on the east side in Uptown Village and provide a crosswalk at that juncture. So those are Jason's thoughts that we all I believe got a copy of by email, but I just read those for the benefit of any listeners. So with that, is there any discussion? We have a motion to approve this resolution, and it's been seconded, and I'm not hearing any discussion.
Well, Andrew, could you just walk through the intersection and like your memo, just briefly kind of walk
Yep.
through it? I'm sure we'll
Yeah.
all go through it, but.
Yeah, so a little bit of background. So there is a planning study on the website. There's tons of information on the website for this one. I'll share my screen just to help everybody walk through it. So on the background side of the house, so, up front, I always talk about funding. So we have the kind of initial, the CIP funding there, and then we also have what kind of our updated revised construction cost is. And so that really, with the CIP, that really necessitated us breaking this into 2 different projects. And, as I mentioned earlier, applying for the Clayton to McCoy portion of the project separately as a HISIP project. So we'll just be talking about Aurora north to West Clayton tonight. It's kind of phase 1 of the project. And so you can see that here. So this is Aurora down here, south of Lacey. And so this is pretty small. I can zoom in on that. We do have a blown up version later. And so just to give everybody kind of a frame of reference. So, so this is Lacey, this is Cheyenne coming up to McCoy here. And really the extent of the project is Aurora to West Clayton in this phase 1. And so you can see a number of different cross sections on here, kind of A, B, and C. Generally speaking, we like to just say one typical cross section. So we went with B as kind of the predominant cross section here, but there are some subtle differences between A, B, and C. So you can kind of see what those are here. And these were the original. This is in the February 25th, earlier this year. This is what we presented. And so I have some background in here. We received 60 responses from residents. Much of the concern was related to that block between Central Park and Argus in here.
And can you, I'm sorry, where is Central Park? There was something I didn't know.
What's that?
What is Central Park? Where is that?
So I think I heard you. So Central Park is here. It connects in with Nine Bark. So Nine Bark on the west side and Central Park on the east side. Can you see that?
Sorry about that, yes.
Yep. So most of the comments we received were relating to this stretch, this green stretch in here. And so, you know, and most of the problem was my fault early on the public meeting that, you know, just getting up to speed with the project. But I think most of the kind of misunderstanding was that we were talking about parking in that stretch, and I know a lot of folks felt like the homes, you know, the newer homes there fronting the road, that parking would then infringe on the west side, and you know, there's a historic property there. So we clarified that. Most of our meetings in the last couple of months have been, you know, talking about that stretch. I met with all property owners out there to talk about the options, and we definitely laid out some options, and I think that's still a possibility to either have parking or not, but it doesn't really affect the overall corridor, and so that's why we're moving forward with just a typical section. I want to take that particular section, that more controversial one, back to the public just to clarify what the options are. Really, it's either terrace on the east side or parking on the east side. It doesn't really affect the west side, and so I just want to make sure that that goes back to the public before you know, making any specific refinements on that. But otherwise, you know, the rest of the project is, you know, is generally a similar concept. And so just walking through more of it. So you can definitely find those alternatives on the project website. And then, you know, really we get to kind of what the now overall recommendation is. And so in this case, we're talking about, you know, I'll just talk about cross-section B, but it's very similar for the other one. So we have 10-foot travel lanes starting in the middle, the 2-foot painted buffer with a 4-foot asphalt surface bike lane. So those are buffered bike lanes, 6-foot total asphalt surface. 2-foot curb and gutter, so that's a foot of the gutter pan and a foot of the curb pan. Generally 7-foot terrace, but they do vary along the stretch, especially on the west side as the bike path kind of goes in and out. We have that existing bike path on the west side at 10 feet. And then for the great majority of the project, we do have sidewalks. We do have a couple homes, and then south of East Sherrill, that area doesn't have sidewalk either. So we are you know, proposing installing it there. We still have to talk to the property owners and verify placement and kind of how that would work. But that's currently included in kind of the overall cross section because again, it's included, it's existing in the majority of the corridor. And really, so I have some additional exhibits. There's also a great report on the website that goes in a ton more detail about, you know, the volumes and kind of how we came to this conclusion with planning and study. And so I'm certainly happy to go through that if you'd like. But you know, we could try to keep it pithy for you know, the summary. So, and really, and then this is what you can kind of see from the pros and cons. A lot of this work, you know, this was 6 different meetings, hour-and-a-half meetings with I think 10 to 17 residents along the corridor, talking about the pros and cons of each of these cross-sectional elements. A lot of work went in this, and just kind of talking about, you know, what some of these things could do. I know there's a lot of hope that we can slow down speeds. That's kind of the number one thing I'm hearing from folks. And you know, initially we really wanted those medians with some of the costs that comes with. Those got taken off, but now we do have kind of narrowed lanes to try to decrease speed. And you know, though this is not a cross-sectional element, we're talking about generally putting you know, 3 to 4 pedestrian refuge islands and kind of gateway treatments on either end, potentially having roundabouts or you know, or mini roundabout and Nine Bark, and you know, and a roundabout potentially at East Sherrill or a traffic signal. So I think there will be kind of other elements that could slow folks down, but those kind of will be we'll wait for those for a separate time. Right now, we're just talking about the cross-section. And a blown up version. So you can see, I talked about B here, which is the majority of the project. A is very similar to that in terms of the street segment, but so that's this yellow down here. But we are saying that we'd either have curbs or ditches specifically kind of in this more rural cross section without any properties fronting it. So that's kind of the proposal. That's how we would deviate slightly from the overall typical. And then similarly in C, we'd be talking about potentially having parking on the east side. So that would be this 9 feet would either be parking or terrace. And so that wouldn't change the overall cross-section or alignment. That would just be kind of those individual sections would differ. And so with that, I think that's, and this is the actual resolution with the specific areas called out. And so this is very similar to what you would have seen on West Lacey. So with that, any questions?
Are there questions, Troy? Did you want to?
And is this one of those roads that the city has marked as no driveways are to be added? Like, PD is an example I see every day where there's no driveways except the grandfather clauses. 2 or 3 houses that have that access. Is this a similar type of street?
That's a good question. I'm not familiar with that. I know that the new developments that are going in here do not have driveways fronting. So, for example, the most recent would be Noak's Ridge and Uptown, and neither new development had accesses directly onto Cyene. So I believe that might be the case, but I can double check that for you.
Have to provide access for parking by another mechanism if there's no driveway access. So I don't know if this is a formal city policy or not, but to me it makes sense not to have parking if there's no driveway access as a related set of issues.
Thank you. I noticed that we've been joined by Jason. Jason, in your absence, I read your email. So to remind everybody about it, we are in the process of discussing our 14921, the Cyene Road cross-section. So if just to let you know where we are. Other discussion, comments? Hearing none, and just briefly, I gather that you've had, I'm impressed by the amount of public outreach you've done, Andrew, and the number of meetings and the depth this has gone into. I gather that there is 2 things. One, that this is not a lot different from what it was, has not changed a lot responding to public comments, but that you've satisfied concerns you've heard and understood concerns you've heard from the public. So I appreciate that work. So I think we're ready to vote, unless there's any further discussion. All those in favor of this, of approving this resolution, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, it is.
Aye.
Oh. Is that Jason? I heard a voice.
I voted aye.
Okay, thank you. So at any rate, there's therefore the recommendation of this commission to approve that resolution. The next resolution is R-14421, authorizing acceptance of the fabrication and installation of exterior wayfinding signage project bid. Could I have a motion to approve that resolution?
I move to adopt.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion is made and seconded. Did you want to introduce this, Andrew?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, this is kind of a follow-up to what you guys talked about last time. So we put this out to bid earlier this year. It came back much, 4 of the 5 were much higher, and we felt like we weren't really getting the product that we wanted. And so we rescoped the project, changed the specifications, put it out for bid, and we got 3 bids back, and one of them reduced quite a bit, down to $103,150. So that's the current low bidder. I'm happy to go through the details of the project. I talked about that a little bit last time. It's basically to install 52 wayfinding signs to, I believe, 18 different points of interest throughout the city. So basically this will be the low bidder. If it's acceptable to accept their bid, then we'd be getting under contract with them later this month, and then obviously with council approval, and then getting those signs in. Likely the first phase will go in this fall, and then we wait until a bunch of our long-term construction projects are over, and then put in the second phase once they're done. So.
All right. Having heard that, is there any other discussion from commission members?
I'll make one. I used to let bids back in a previous life, and I was always a little nervous about the lowest bidder. But checking through all this stuff, I was very impressed with these guys. They've got a very good record as far as workers' comp. They've got a long history, so I'm fully support this.
Yeah, I'll echo his comments. I thought the bidder did a very good job of presenting themselves and the documents. And I think they have a lot of credibility in their approach. And so I think you picked the right one.
All right. Thank you for those comments. Are there any other comments before we vote? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
There's one opposition. Did I hear, was that a vote, an aye?
I believe he said aye. I think he's just delayed.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'll take that as a unanimous vote to approve. With that, I think we've concluded the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Move to second.
Excuse me, before we get to that second, I see there's a item for announcements. Is there any other announcements that anybody wanted to make? Or Andrew? Okay, hearing none.
We do have a new member. I just want to let everybody know. She wasn't able to make it tonight, but Charity, she'll be here next time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So we're at full strength for next meeting. I think we got a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Oh, we've already done that vote. No, we're adjourning. We're getting out of here.